All right, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us during your lunch hour for our fourth of our four-part webinar lunch series with LADPH and Leah's Pantry. I believe I know all of you. If anyone is joining who I have not met before, welcome and hello. My name is Leah Quinn. I'm a senior program manager here at Leah's Pantry. Um, and I am joined by my colleague, Amy Cochran, who will be co-hosting with me today, co-facilitating. So um, these are just an hour. They're super short. It's totally fine to be off camera. We know a lot of you are eating lunch. It's the middle of the day. That's perfect. With that in mind, there are not going to be any breakout sessions today, but we will be using two forms of interaction and processing. One is the chat box. So we would love for you to stay as engaged as possible and share your thoughts and feedback via the chat box. And additionally, we are going to have a few moments of reflection today. So kind of applying some of the tools you're going to be learning. And so to do that, if you can grab a pen and paper or have a Google Doc open and ready to go, that is going to serve you really well because we want you to have an opportunity to reflect and just on your own kind of think through um, some of the topics that we'll be talking about. And we are recording this so that we can put it on our online course so that it'll be there for you later. So I want to start with thanking CalFresh Healthy Living for their support in the development of this training. Of course, this material is funded by USDA's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and this institution is an equal opportunity provider. Okay, so today, like I said, it's webinar 4 out of 4. We have made it through the summer, although we're in Southern California, so it actually feels like we're at the start of summer, I feel like. Um, but in theory, we've made it through our summer series. So topic 1 was trauma-informed nutrition security and offering more choice at your distributions. Topic 2 was all about integrating more nutrition education into your sites. Our last topic was about developing customer service skills and applying a customer service approach to your work. And today is all about supporting staff wellness. So we're going to be talking about self-care, regulation, attunement, mindfulness. It is a nice topic. I think it's very, very relevant. Just based on, maybe coming out of a long weekend, let's keep that good feeling of relaxation going, especially during such a stressful time that I know many of us are in. So as a reminder, you can find this recording, you can find all the previous recordings, and you can find lots of extra resources in our online course. So we just made those extra resources available. So now when you log in, actually under optional resources here on the screen, you'd see readings, you'd see nutrition education links, you're going to see all different types of things. So be sure to go back in and check that out. If not for the recording, then at least to look at those optional resources. Okay, we're talking all about self-care. Today, we're going to be doing lots of regulation and attunement together. Let's start with one of my favorite. It is called box breathing. Or square breathing. It is just a technique to use to encourage slow, deep breaths. So we're going to kind of follow this box, starting on the left with exhale. But before we begin, just kind of double check, are your feet on the floor? Are they flat? I'm standing, so that's easy for me to do. Sit up tall. So easy to get that, what is it? They call it like the computer spine throughout the day, where we start hunching forward. So kind of like, shoulders up and back, relax. Eyes down, eyes closed, whatever is comfortable for you. And then with box breathing, you just follow the prompts on the screen. So you're going to do an exhale for 4 seconds, or for a count of 4 is what I prefer. And then hold that for a count of 4. Inhale for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. And then exhale for a count of 4. So let's just do that a couple of times. So exhaling, hold, inhale, hold, exhale, Hold. Inhale, hold. Okay, do that one more time just on your own because I might have not had the same exact count of four that you do. So and I like to end with another exhale. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the goal of that, as many of the things we're going to talk about today, it's all about calming our nervous system, connecting our breath, connecting our body, helping us be more present, helping us to connect with each other. And that actually helps you retain new information. So even if not for the relaxation benefits, which are probably my favorite part, but just to be able to really be present and absorb what's around you, taking a beat to do something like a breath is really helpful. So with that, I'll pass it over to Amy.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Leah. Like Leah said, I'm Amy. I'm a senior project coordinator here with Leah's Pantry, and I'm going to start us off by discussing self-care. And so before we dive deep into this, I would actually like to pass it over to you and ask what comes to mind when you hear the term self-care? And if you could, please share your thoughts in the chat box. I'll give a minute or so for this. Okay, yeah, I agree with everyone. So now that I've heard your thoughts about self-care, I just want to provide a simple definition, and it can really be defined by the term itself, which is caring for yourself. Self-care can be further defined as anything you do to keep yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually healthy. So here's another definition that goes a little bit deeper, that you also may find helpful is the ability to care for oneself through awareness, self-control, and self-reliance in order to achieve, maintain, or promote optimal health and well-being. So, how do we know if we are engaging in self-care that works for us and meets our needs? A general rule of thumb for self-care is that it will feel good now and later. Good self-care is a tool that helps us manage and respond to our stressors and our challenges. It can provide us with the emotional space we need to see the things that are outside of our realm of control and tackle the things we can. And lastly, self-care is an ongoing process for all of us, and it often changes to meet our needs. There's no one size fits all solution, and there's no checklist for self-care. So I want to take a look at some numbers. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, about 83% of US workers report experiencing work-related stress. And then there was another interesting study done about self-care and about how 1 out of 4 people feel guilt for engaging in self-care. But some good news is that most people, 97% in this study specifically, believe that it's important to make time for self-care. Okay, so now that we've defined what self-care is, let's discuss what self-care is not. In more recent years, self-care has become more synonymous with consumerism or buying certain products like bath bombs, skincare serums, expensive spa treatments. This idea of self-care is actually a massive industry, especially in our digital world. So it's important that we pay attention to the marketing of wellness because that can actually lead us away from authentic and realistic self-care. Sometimes self-care can also serve as a way to ignore or avoid our problems, but self-care can also help improve our perspective or mood, not necessarily make our problems go away. And then also, current discourse around self-care hyper focuses on individualism, perfectionism, and personal responsibility instead of turning to our relationships and community and recognizing that we're actually interdependent beings. And lastly, self-care sometimes becomes an achievement metric or something that has to be earned. But it's really important that we remember that self-care is not an award, but it's essential for our ability to thrive. So, is modern day self-care simply diet culture repackaged? Current ideas of self-care that we just mentioned, one that is commodified, hyper-focused on personal responsibility and perfection, that can also be seen as diet culture repackaged. Because both the self-care and the diet industry are both multi-billion dollar industries that thrive on people not trusting themselves to know how to care for themselves, knowing what foods are nourishing to them, and understanding what their real needs are. So, as I mentioned before, we know that self-care is commodified. Some products that are marketed as self-care can actually reinforce diet culture by selling us products that focus on things like weight loss, altering your body, or pursuing unrealistic beauty standards. And self-care can also exploit the desire for improvement. So this might come in the form of a hyper focus on exercise, or other treatments to achieve a youthful appearance, like skincare routines, for example. So when it comes to self-care, we really want to be mindful to make sure we are truly nurturing ourselves, opposed to following a protocol that inherently makes us feel bad about ourselves. So now that we've defined self-care and understand why it's relevant to our work, let's go through some signs that you may need some more self-care. So at the top of this list, and something that I think we all have felt at some point, is persistent exhaustion. We may also feel increased irritability, impatience, anger. We might feel busy but not accomplished. We might have difficulty concentrating or remembering. And it can also present in physical symptoms like headaches or digestive issues, or maybe even changes in sleep or appetite. So, we first want to acknowledge that we're living through a really difficult time, particularly for public health. We're seeing massive budget cuts to our public health nutrition infrastructure, and with that, potential layoffs and uncertainty, which makes self-care even more important right now so that we can build our own capacity because this work is important and it will continue. So in your work, you may have also been feeling compassion fatigue, which is this result in a feeling of numbness or decreased sense of purpose. You also might experience vicarious trauma or overly identifying with other clients' trauma. You might experience moral injury, which is very common in the public health sector because um, it's where the system can really impede on one's own moral responsibility for care. So this may arise when you know what the right thing to do is, but institutional constraints make it nearly impossible to do so. You might also experience workplace culture and dynamics that could be toxic. And then lastly, burnout, especially in times of uncertainty. And one more, false guilt, which I just touched upon a little bit before, but we might feel guilty for actually just taking care of ourselves in the first place. Okay, so I'm going to put it back on you, and I want to ask, what are some signs that you need more self-care? And you can please answer in the chat. It doesn't have to be the things that I just mentioned. It can be something else. So I'm just curious to see what are your signs that you need some more self-care? Brain fog, definitely. Increased irritability. Yeah, I think for me, it comes out in just persistent exhaustion, which can sometimes be a little bit more insidious. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah now for self-care to community care.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so Amy just spent some time defining self-care and sharing those really vital warning signs that we need to look out for. Those alert us to at times when we do need to practice more self-care. But let's move into the actual practice of self-care and then beyond that, linking that to all the work that you're already doing in the community. And to really do that justice, we need to start by talking about two different concepts. So, one is self-attunement, and the other is self-care and how they're linked. So, Amy shared that definition of self-care, right? Self-care, think of it as all those actions that you're taking that support your physical, your mental, and your emotional health. It is the what we do. Now, I like to think of self care as like filling our cup back up. We used to have this image that we'd have on slides of like a jug of water and the water is being poured into, a cup and filling it up. Um, and that's always really stuck with me. I think self-care, it's crucial. We know it's something we should be practicing it regularly, but it is just one piece of the puzzle. The other really interesting piece is to think a little bit more about self-attunement, because self-attunement is the internal process. It's the, I'm noticing what's going on in me. I'm able to respond to my own needs. I'm able to maintain presence in the moment. So it's really the how, it's the why behind the what, which is self-care, right? So self-attunement is more about pausing and then asking yourself, well, what is it that I'm feeling right now? What is it that I need in this moment? It's really practicing getting used to like getting quiet and just listening to your body and your mind, which is not something we're always used to doing. It's not something that we always make time for, especially, as busy as we all are these days. But if you're in a state where you're like, oof, I'm actually noticing right now, I feel pretty overwhelmed. Like for me, I know it's my shoulders. I'll go through half the day and I'll be like, why are my shoulders like up all the way at my ears at this point? So I'm noticing like, wow, my body's actually holding a ton of tension. So that's self-attunement when I can notice that and then understand like, oh, okay, I probably need to take a few deep breaths right now, kind of relax my posture. It's a very intuitive response for us often to start to attune to our bodies and our minds as well. So remember, self-attunement here, this is like our compass. It's telling us which direction we need to go in. And then self-care is our destination. You attune to what you need, you choose the action that's best going to fit that need, and really try and move from just doing self-care to really being more self-attuned. Um, that helps you shift from being a little bit more reactive to more responsive. And I think it's really important, especially for all of you who are always thinking about and responding to the needs of others. So, what does this even have to do with, trauma-informed care or trauma-informed approach, and how does this connect to the community work you're doing? Well, first and foremost, dysregulated people can't help others. And we're going to talk about regulation in a second, but basically think of it like the when you're flying in the airplane and the oxygen, they say like, oh, if the oxygen mask drops, you have to put it on yourself before you put it on the person next to you. It's the same thing when we work with the community, right? You have to take that time to take care of yourself before you focus on everyone else around you. So we actually create safety. We earn community trust by showing up well regulated, attuned, by having practiced self care in authentic ways. And then when we are regulated and attuned, we're really better able to actually help others, to establish deeper relationships, to think more logically, practicing regulation, attunement, self care, all that. It helps keep us in our frontal lobe, which is like the newer part of our brain, better for thinking logically and long term, as opposed to our primal brain, which is what we're operating under when we're in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, when we're under extreme stress. And also, when we're regulated, we're better able to intentionally contribute and really build those healed and healing communities, those resilience factors, those protective factors that we want to incorporate into our environments, into our practices as well. So you can really think of it as like the pebble that you're dropping into the water. And that's why I like this visual on the screen of like the three circles, because it reminds me of the rippling outward effects that you get when you drop a pebble and the change that can really happen beyond just you. It's the same thing. So I was talking a little bit about regulation and being dysregulated on the previous slide. So I think it's really important to have a good understanding of what regulation is, to know its definition, and to know what being dysregulated and that definition is as well. So self-regulation, this is a really important part of trauma-informed care. And when we talk about regulation, we mean how are we able to manage our emotional responses? So when we're dysregulated, we might feel like, wow, my emotions are really leading me in this situation. Um, and they're making me react in ways that I don't feel like I have as much control over, versus being regulated or more able to respond in a way that I choose to and want to. So this is again where that self-attunement comes in. This is how you can start to think about, let me assess how I'm feeling. Am I in a regulated state? Am I in a dysregulated state? If I'm dysregulated, what are things that I can do to help bring myself into a better state of regulation and to feel more regulated? And it's not about completely getting rid of feelings or having them just evaporate, but it helps to know, what are we dealing with? You know, what is my body state right now? What is my mental state? And I can be honest and be like, it's terrible, right? Like I'm not in a good place. That's okay. Attunement isn't about, I'm feeling great now, all is well. Like, let's move forward in peace. It's more about, let me just get curious and honest about where I'm at so I can try and build things in my environment that can help support me for whatever I need in that moment, right? And it's the same for others as well. So, regulation, it doesn't have to be a formal practice, but there are some fun things that we like to suggest doing. I know some of you are longtime Leah's Pantry listeners because I see so many familiar names on here. So I'm sorry if you have done 500 soup bowl breathings and coconut stretches and that sort of thing. I promise you, I've probably done 500,000 at this point. But they honestly, I've been doing them for 6 years and they are still tools that I use to this day. So I am going to go through a few of our favorite regulation activities. These are things you can work into a meeting, you can work into the start of a distribution, you can just make some time. You could just be by yourself, do them formally, informally, it doesn't matter, but I want to give you some suggestions and get you thinking about interesting ways to incorporate some more regulation activities into your day. So soup bowl breathing. For those who haven't done this, it's honestly such a cozy, relaxation and group regulation activity. It's really good to do this as a group actually. And then kind of afterwards you're like, I was thinking of chicken soup. Like, oh, mine is, lentil, whatever it is. It's kind of funny how it leads to like soup talk. Maybe not perfect for, the middle of summer, 85-degree days plus. Um, it's your gazpacho soup bowl breathing, I think. But if you haven't done this before, I'm going to quickly take you through it. So basically, like it, like how I cued you up earlier. It's kind of the same thing. Like, hey, relax, feet on the floor. Like, take that moment to attune. You don't say that, but that's basically what you're cueing people to do. Figure out where your body and your mind is at. Cup hands, gently look down or close eyes, and then you imagine you're holding a nice warm or cool bowl of soup. And then you're taking a breath in through the nose, breathing in the smell, gently blowing out. And that is to cool your soup, right? When you do it carefully, so not to splash everywhere. So it's just, you cue people, hey, do this a few times, or again, you do this yourself. Let me just do this a couple times. So it's just that thoughtful in through the nose, out through the mouth. So that's soup bowl breathing. Stop. I love this one as well. Soup bowl breathing, I'd say, is really good for all ages. Stop is as well, although I mostly have done it with like an adult audience, I'd say. So it stands for sit or stand, take a breath, observe, and presence. So let's practice it again together. So the first one is S. Am I sitting? Am I standing? I'm noticing where I'm at. Feel my body in this position. Then after that, you move on to the T, which is just take a breath. Really notice the air going in through your nose, exhaling through the mouth. Observe. So you're actually being cued to use all of your senses or most of your senses here. So, okay, let me look around. What do you see? Can you count how many green things are around you? Like really look around your room. It's a nice computer break as well to just cue yourself like, oh, let me look away from the screen. They say it's good for you to look at something far away every so often when you're working at the computer. And then the P stands for presence. So that is just again, this one's a little bit stranger, I'd say, to get used to, but it's a little bit more about where am I in relation to objects? It's very grounding, I'd say, to just notice your own presence in the room. So it's a little bit, again, of that kind of noticing, like, where am I? Where's everything in relation around me? Like, what is my physical body doing in this space? So that's stop. That's another really good, easy, and quick regulation activity. We love the status checks. I think having these on posters printed so that people can like kind of point to where they're at today, kicking off a meeting, a distribution shift, a volunteer shift, a staff check-in, whatever it may be, having something like a fun status check. It's a really good way. Again, what we're doing here is getting people to attune. So thinking about what is my physical and mental state, right? And it's a status check is a pretty low bar, low barrier way to, you don't have to share that much. You can just sort of say, like, if I say that I'm number 8 versus number 2, you probably get a sense that I'm having 2 very different days, right? So that's why we love that. Just how are you feeling right now? Like point to a scale, kind of note where you're at. Okay, and then our absolute favorite, my absolute favorite, I guess I'll say, doing a coconut stretch. And you don't have to just use coconut. We have other staff members who have used all different types of words. Your body can spell most letters of the alphabet, so keep that in mind. Make it really personal to you and your organization. But for this one, we like coconut. It's just with your body leaning over to the side for a C, up above for the O. I like to go other side for the C, above again for the O, leaning down for an N, arms up for the U, and then side to side for the T. And that way you can kind of actually do a lean from one side to the other. So then, you kind of do it once slowly and then tell everyone like, okay, let's do it a little bit faster, do it once more. So kind of this one, just C, O, C, O, N, U, T. So that's a great regulation activity. As is like grabbing a walk or grabbing a coworker and going on a walk, all these simple things that you can do, right? So I hope that you all have the opportunity to practice a little bit more regulation and attunement today. When thinking about how and why you incorporate this into a space like a produce distribution, well, I like to take that over to the side of co-regulation. So we talked all about regulation, and a lot of those activities were regulation activities you can do for yourself, right? Now, co-regulation is this mutual exchange of regulation. It's a two-way street. So even if you're the one offering support to a neighbor or offering a moment of calm, your own nervous system is being influenced, as is theirs. So how they're reacting is actually influencing your nervous system. How you react is influencing others' nervous systems. So we can use that to our advantage. We can do something called co-regulation. This might look like modeling calmness. So if someone's distressed or overwhelmed, you model that calm demeanor. You use that steady tone of voice. maintaining a grounded presence. That's providing all these nonverbal cues that it's safe to de-escalate. So kind of tying back into a lot of our customer service mindsets, these are also very much so around regulating and co-regulating too. It's the same with active listening. It's not just about, I want to solve some problems immediately. It's let's provide a safe space for our neighbors' emotions here. So I can listen actively, I can validate feelings, I can say, it sounds like you're really feeling frustrated by this. Um, that helps people know they're seen, they're heard. That's in and of itself a really powerful step towards regulation. You can also think of co-regulation and how you build out your environments. So how can you structure interactions and spaces to really reduce stress as much as possible? Is it finding a quiet place out of the hubbub of an active, busy line, to talk? Is it providing a really clear and predictable plan for an upcoming distribution? So you can really create environments that make people feel safer, which provides co-regulation. And then finally, you can actually empower your community with their own self-regulation skills, right? So showing and teaching regulation skills or techniques, maybe that is something that really resonates with that person. And then that becomes a part of their own practice that they can take with them. Now, self-attunement and regulation go hand in hand with mindfulness and implicit bias. So they're really important to talk about in the same grouping here. So implicit bias, many of you already know this, but it is an unconscious attitude or perception, often negative, about a person or a group of people. So we touched on this and we talked about reframing in a previous session, right? Our brains are always categorizing people and associating them with specific qualities. And that is just being human. It is just natural. But if we bring mindfulness to ourselves, and that's a tool of attunement, we can really disrupt that knee-jerk reaction that is implicit bias. So mindfulness, which counteracts implicit bias, is the awareness of what's happening in the present moment. So it's a really powerful tool for developing more self-awareness, for developing more cultural humility, which I'll talk about in a second, and for helping us address all of our biases and blind spots. So mindfulness helps us be less reactive and more responsive. It helps us be less judgmental. And if you haven't already, it's a really interesting practice to complete one of Harvard's implicit bias tests. They have a huge library of them that you can do online, and you can see where your own implicit biases lie, right? If you're not sure, then you can actually learn and bring them to the forefront, and then you can be even more mindful and aware of them. So cultural humility, which I just talked about, it's a really good tool for combating implicit bias as well. So it is the art of being open to learning about other cultures, being respectful of others' beliefs and values, and even when they differ from your own. So it requires some of these tools that we've already been talking about, right? Self-reflection, curiosity, and openness, letting go of any assumptions, asking, listening. So I really think of cultural humility as leaning on this kind of open and curious mindset. So when we practice cultural humility, we really start with thinking about what are my own beliefs and cultural identities and things that I'm bringing to the table, and then recognizing power dynamics and imbalances that might be in place. So this is going to really help me to approach others with more curiosity, letting go of those assumptions, letting go of some of those biases that I might have about a situation, right? Okay, so that was a lot. That was a lot of definitions and review. So I actually want to ask you to take a moment to practice some attunement and awareness right now. So if you want to just think this through, if you want to take your pen and paper and actually jot this down, I welcome that as well. So answer these three questions for me. And you do not have to do this in the chat. This is just like an internal process. How am I feeling in my own body right now? What are thoughts in my head? What is my overall emotional state? So I'm just going to be quiet for a minute and let us all take a moment to reflect on those three questions. Okay, hopefully you had an opportunity to reflect. And maybe based on what you learned, you actually realized like, wow, I wasn't incredibly attuned to myself today. Maybe I do need to kind of start to practice something that helps bring me into a more regulated state. I'm going to end this section by talking about Audre Lorde, who is a writer and activist. She wrote about self care in the 1980s as a form of self preservation, which I love. And she talks about how this is really foundational to community building and the difference between actually overextending herself and stretching herself. So overextending yourself, that's unsustainable. That's going to lead to burnout. That does not allow space to recover and restore. But when you stretch yourself, that means, okay, I'm trying to reach my fullest potential. That can actually lead to growth and change for yourself and I think for your communities as well. And I love this quote that she has, which is caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So the hope is that through self awareness, you're able to gather all the information necessary to recognize all the intentional and personalized self care practices that really help you navigate life's many varied experiences. Okay. So I'm going to pass it back over to Amy and we will talk even more specifically about some good self care practices.
Yes, thank you, Leah. Like Leah said, I'm going to take us through some self-care practices. And so we categorize this into four buckets of self-care and ways that you can support your mental well-being. And they fall into these categories. Relaxation, mental or physical activity, creativity, and asking for what's needed. So the first bucket of self-care that we want to discuss is relaxation. Most of us are constantly in a state of working, so it can be quite difficult to factor in relaxation into our lives. And some of us may even see it as a chore or a waste of time, especially when we have so many things that we have to do. But factoring in relaxation is really important for us so we can better connect and listen to others, and especially in our specific line of work. So, relaxation can take many forms, and it's about finding what works best for you. You can take a relaxing walk, you can cuddle with your kids or pets, watch your favorite TV show, listen to music, spend time in nature, the list goes on. You can also try to take breaks from what you're doing to be more present. So, like Leah was saying, if you're like looking at your screen a lot, it is really important to kind of even just look away for a few seconds, give yourself frequent breaks so you can factor in relaxation, maybe even throughout your day if you can. It's also important to know that you don't need to put yourself into this full on meditation, but just taking the time to pause and notice your breath, your surroundings, and how you're feeling can all have benefits. And Leah just went through a series of different attunements. You can do the coconut stretch, you can do the stop method. So there's a lot of different methods that you can factor in so that you can become you can use relaxation as a self-care tool. And then our second bucket is mental and physical activity. So when we focus on something else, either mentally or physically, it gives our nervous system a break from being worried or anxious. And we could do this through a couple different ways. One way is through effortful training, which is a more sustained physical activity over an extended period of time, or through joyful movement, which is an approach to physical activity that focuses on pleasure and enjoyment. So, some examples, effortful training can include running, cycling, weightlifting, or playing tennis. Joyful movement can be anything that you enjoy while moving your body. It can be dancing, walking, stretching, playing an active video game. The idea here, though, is the same, and you want to give uh, you're using movement as a way to give your mind a break. So whether you engage in effortful training or joyful movement is really up to you. One is not better than the other, and they can kind of fall into each category too. Like cycling is an effortful training, but it can also be joyful movement for you. Um, so another way to give our nervous system a break is through mental activity, and this can include reading a book, doing a puzzle, card games, or playing an instrument. Our third bucket of self-care is creativity. The act of creating something that didn't exist before can help us connect to ourselves better and act as an outlet for release and expression. So, creativity does not come in just one form of art that we usually think of, like painting or photography. You can also try cooking or baking, creating a new recipe yourself, writing a story or sharing a story, or any form of crafting like knitting or scrapbooking. So, the idea is similar. So, similar to when you are physically active, when you are involved in a creative project, your mind enters a state of focus, which then creates a sense of calm and relaxation. So again, the goal here is not to create this masterpiece, but just to engage in some form of self-expression and relaxation. A lot of people say that they don't have time to engage in creative ways, but it's important to remember that it can be simple and you don't have to put pressure on yourself. So also with a lot of these self-care examples that we've used so far, these activities can fit into multiple buckets. So for example, walking outside can be both a physical activity, but it can be relaxing. Crafting can help you engage with your creative side, but again, that can also be a relaxing activity. And then our fourth and last bucket of self-care is asking what's needed for yourself and also for your community. Too often, self-care is an individual pursuit, like I had mentioned before, when we should also focus on how we can help others and know when to ask for help ourselves. So I want to introduce the concept of community care here, which is an approach utilized by individuals to help one another and the broader community, with the belief that the well-being of the individual is intrinsically tied to the well-being of the community. Examples of community care look like cooking a meal for someone or helping a friend with childcare while they're sick. More structured forms of community care can look like support or neighborhood groups or community-based organizations. So, community care can also help us find belonging, connection, and collective support, which help with improving our overall well-being. So, next time you're feeling overwhelmed and need to engage in more self-care, remember that community care and asking help from others is also available. We don't have to go through anything by ourselves. So now that we know what forms of self-care and community care are helpful, we can use SMART goals to help get us going. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So they offer a way to track your progress and provide specific times and frequencies for when you will engage in your self-care plan. The reason that we're talking about SMART goals is because there is evidence that writing down or even telling a friend your SMART goal can actually help you in achieving your goal. You may even want to get a friend involved in some of your self-care plans, like asking them to come for a walk with you, for example, or having a joint knitting session. Here are some examples. Walk for 30 minutes after work 3 times this week. Practice the drums for 40 minutes on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And ask my mom on Monday to help me come up with a care plan for a grandmother. So the first one fits into the physical activity bucket, walking for 30 minutes. The second one can cover the mental and creative bucket by practicing the drums. And then the last one fits into the asking for what's needed bucket. Okay, so I do want to invite you to create your own SMART goal in regards to these four buckets. You don't have to, but if you want, you can share in the chat um, your SMART goal. So feel free to use any one of these buckets or even something outside of these buckets to create a SMART goal for yourself. I'm going to give everyone about a minute to either think about it or put in the chat what your SMART goal is. All right. Well, I hope you all thought about a SMART goal. And if you don't want to share it, that's okay. Maybe you could share it with a friend. Maybe you can write it down. And you can use these four buckets as a guide um, for making that goal. Okay, so just gonna go over some key takeaways. Um, Self-attunement and self-care are not selfish. They are essential. They're essential to your well-being, and it's important to engage with it in whatever ways that you can. Self-attunement helps us identify our needs and show up as our best selves. Practicing self-care is self-preservation and it's individual to everyone. And SMART goals help us long term and make intentional lifestyle changes.
Um, but I'd say like big picture takeaways are thinking about um, opportunities to incorporate more self-care, thinking about attunement and how that relates to your self-care practices, being really intentional about regulation activities and attuning to states when you are dysregulated, thinking about how that impacts your community-based work. And then, I love the buckets that Amy shared too, of if I really want to get intentional about some self-care goals, let me think about some of these four buckets. And you do not have to do all of them. It's not about feeling like, oh, this is another thing that I don't have time for, or, am not good at. It's really about, well, what of these buckets or buckets even outside of these are things that really fill my cup. So I want y'all to really reflect on that this week. Okay, so with that, let's go into our closing. These little lunch hour webinars go by so quickly. So we're at the end of our series. I want to give just a couple of updates. First off, thank you so much everyone who's joined us for this session, for all four sessions, for some of them. Since this is our final meeting, reminder, you can access this training, this recording, all those great resources, all in that Talent LMS course. So definitely log in and make sure that you check out everything that we have there. We can add your coworkers to this course for the next year. So if you have people who join your staff, if you have people who need to take this training, let us know. We can add them to the course so they can see the recording and the resources as well. Additionally, I think this self-care stuff is really timely. I know that at Leah's Pantry, we, as I'm sure many of you have as well, are dealing with a lot of uncertainty around funding, what work we're going to be doing, over the next few years and what that'll look like, and just kind of dealing with all the uncertainty of just the direction, we're going in, I'd say. So know that we are a part of that too. And a lot of you have been working with us for a long time. So, Leah's Pantry, just from our perspective, we expect that our role and our work is going to change and shift and evolve somewhat with the loss of CalFresh Healthy Living funding and SNAP-Ed funding. But we are still around. We plan to be around, and we remain committed to a trauma-informed approach, a strengths-based approach, and you will always be able to access trainings, resources, technologies, tools, all those things. So everything you receive from this session and all the stuff in Talent LMS, you'll continue to have access to that, because we will continue to be here, but also no matter what, even if, we start to work in some different settings and sectors, none of that is going to change. I know that there have been some questions from our partners about that. So I wanted to make that really clear. Um, if you are in a state where you feel like your role might be shifting or changing, please continue to stay in touch. And one easy way to do that is to think about signing up for our Leah's Pantry newsletter with your personal email address. So I have actually a link where if you are anticipating a change in your role and you want to switch out your work email for your personal email to get our newsletter, there's a Google form I just shared that lets you do that. And then finally, some of you are familiar with our Leah's Pantry podcast called Stocking the Pantry. Now, it is going to be sunsetting because it has been funded by CalFresh Healthy Living Funds, but you'll still get access to all the episodes we've already created. And our second to last episode is actually with Christy Garner and all about holistic emotional first aid, which I think is a really timely topic and links well to all this conversation about self-care too. So you might be interested in checking that episode out. And then finally, once again, we are going to ask you to take our survey for this training. So I'm going to also just put that in the chat real quick. It'll also be available in the online learning platform. Make sure you select the option for supporting staff wellness on 9/2/2025. We'd love to hear your feedback. We really appreciate it. It has been a pleasure to share 4 lunches with you. I hope you all have learned a little something and enjoyed it as well. Um, thank you, Jackie. Otherwise, we will go ahead and let you go. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a great short week, which I always look forward to.